All right, so Road to 18-inch arms, episode 22, if I remember correctly. Either way, I'm going to continue with the rapid fire Q&A that I started a couple weeks ago. Got a few more good questions, and with that said, I know one of my more recent videos was the reaction to Jeff Nippard's tricep tier list video. If you have any videos that you want to get my thoughts on or see a reaction to, I'd be happy to. Just let me know in the comments here, and I'll keep an eye out. First question that I want to go for today from the Instagram Q&A. Have you changed anything about your split since your push-pull legs program video back in November? So I actually haven't changed a whole ton. I looked back at the video and just briefly reviewed that program again just to refresh what exactly my program was back in November. But for the most part, things are the same. I changed a couple things with a little bit of the chest training. Obviously, I have my pec deck now, and I've been using my incline hammer strength press quite a bit more lately too, so I have that on one of my days. And other than that, the leg training's changed a fair amount. I actually don't do push-pull legs anymore. I do push-pull legs, push-pull, so it's 5 days a week. I removed one of the leg days. I'd say the biggest change that I've made, a little bit of change to the arm training, but nothing major. It's still JM press and preacher curls for the bread and butter. Main big change is obviously the leg days. So I removed the leg day. I'm doing one leg day, and it's actually quite a bit of upper trap work. So it's rack pulls, RDLs, and a couple other basic things for legs like pendulums and stuff like that. So it's still mostly the same, but the leg stuff's a little bit different. It's actually almost identical to my push-pull legs, push-pull program on Boost Camp. Just to clarify that, it's not a push-pull legs up or lower like I've been seeing a lot of people talk about in the comments. It's a push-pull legs, push-pull. So 2 push days, 2 pull days, only 1 leg day, and that's what makes it a little bit unique. So it's an upper body focused program. Next question, chest has hit a big plateau while the rest still keeps growing. Any tips on chest? So yeah, I mean, assuming that everything else is going well and your training as a whole is pretty good and you know how to grow, which is evident by the rest of your body continuing to grow, with your chest not growing, I find that typically this is from getting enough of a stretch on one or multiple movements. I think the chest is definitely sensitive to the stretch. I would also say having a movement that converges as you press is going to be key too. So chest, you can have a lot of fun with variety with this one. I think it truly is beneficial. I love the basics. I love doing Smith bench on a couple times a week, maybe throw an incline in there too, and that's fine. But if your chest specifically isn't growing and you know that, then having something like maybe a converging machine press or a dumbbell fly or a pec deck or even a dumbbell bench if you don't have access to nice machines, that stuff will all add a ton of variety to whether it's your barbell or Smith machine work. That adds, 1, a big stretch, 2, it adds a diverging and converging effect. I would also say, excuse me, if you don't have something that's stable, so if you're just doing barbells and dumbbells, for example, try adding something that's stable, and that will make a big difference. So if you're missing any of those big 3 key areas, I would try to fill out all 3 of those, or at least get 2 of them down within your program throughout the week, and that should make a big difference. I would also take a look at your technique to make sure you're using a big arch when it's helpful. Next question, if you train chest and biceps today, back and triceps tomorrow, wouldn't bicep fatigue affect your back work? This is a common question that I get with switching biceps and triceps on my push-pull leg split. So I would say with this, in the vast majority of cases, it's probably not going to have an effect. I think it mostly comes down to your technique. So if you're someone that does like a big lockout and a big squeeze with a ton of elbow flexion on all of your back movements, I would say that would affect you. But to counter that, I would say that's also unnecessary. For your back movements, your lats lose a lot of leverage at peak contraction anyways, and when you're obviously training your traps through something like a row, or even a shrug variation, which of course your elbows don't bend at all, it's a very limited range of motion for your elbow. So your bicep won't have to work a whole ton. And 2, if your form's correct, your bicep really doesn't contribute much on your pulls or just back training in general. It really is a secondary mover, and I find a lot of people like to think that biceps and back kind of grow simultaneously in the same movements. Same with chest and triceps, but I really don't find this to be true, as evident by my entire lifting career and philosophy on this channel. Barbell Apparel's Memorial Day sale is still going on. Perfect fit, tailored by athletes for athletes. It's a classic, timeless clothing brand. The colors, the fit, everything. It's designed for lifters. It's designed for bodybuilders. It shows off and fits your physique perfectly. The Memorial Day sale, pants specifically, any pants for $99, limited time, lifetime guarantee for peace of mind. If you break it, they'll replace it, no questions asked. If you gain weight or lose weight, same thing. Swap for a new size. Trust in quality and comfort with Barbell Apparel. Next question, what do you think about rest time for a couple of seconds in the last reps of a set? So this is essentially rest pause. It's an okay method, and there's a lot of times where it can be beneficial, but I'd say in the majority of your lifting program, this probably wouldn't be of that much benefit. If you're using lifts that are challenging in the lengthened position, if you're using lifts that are stable and you can push to failure, most of these lifts just getting to failure, not actually failing, but just getting to 0 reps in reserve is really all you're going to need. So if I look at like the staple meat and potatoes lifts of my program, something like a preacher curl, once I get to 0 reps in reserve or failure on a preacher curl, like I'm completely smoked. There's nothing else I can do. Like a rest pause, partial, like forget it. It's not happening. You could argue that I could potentially do some shortened partials after that, but even then, it's like that's not really what's going to be giving you most of the growth. It's a hard straight set to 0 RIR/failure. Same with the Smith JM press. Like I technically I could probably squeeze out a couple short partials. Rest pause, like maybe I could get one grinder, but by the time I'm there, I've already got the stimulus I'm looking for. Same with like a pendulum squat, Smith bench, stuff like this. It's just not needed that much. You can make the case that for some short bias lifts, it's fine, and I would be an advocate of rest pause or just some short partials past failure. That's fine, or technically lengthened partials in this situation. Sorry to misspeak on that one, and that should be fine. But I'd say for the vast majority of cases that I see personally, people use this method as a way just to get more reps. So let's say you're doing a set of 7 on Smith bench. If you're just to do a straight set to 7 and then fail either on the 8th rep or just know you wouldn't get 8, that's a very potent set. And that's getting you all the stimulus that you need. But a lot of the time people will rest pause. So they'll get to 5, so they'll get to about 2 reps in reserve, pause, get another rep, pause, kind of reset, adjust a little bit, get another rep, then do that maybe 1 or 2 more times. And it's like now you've maybe gotten 8 or 9 reps, but you never actually got to that very grindy, potent failure rep. So they use this as a form of kind of like artificial progressive overload. These are just people that are kind of stuck in the mindset of, oh, I need an extra rep to force my muscles to grow, but in reality you're missing the actual point of the stimulus of that lift. So sorry to rant a little bit on that one, but hopefully that kind of encapsulates my thoughts on rest pause. Next question, what's your current arm volume? 8 sets a week for biceps, 8 sets a week for triceps. A lot of people say it's low, but I don't know, my arms are growing pretty well, and they got up to 17.5 on like 4 or 5 sets a week for each. So I don't know. People can say low volume all they want, but it's volume's overrated, I think. That's a very, very simple way to put it, but maybe I can expand more on that in another video. Next question, maintain post-cut or bulk immediately? Completely depends on the purpose of the cut. Are you cutting to get lean and reveal your physique? Probably want to maintain your leanness for a while. No point just getting there for like a week and then going right back into a bulk. Even though the start of the bulk, technically you'll still be quite lean for a while. So that's another huge misconception I see. But I would say if you're doing a mini cut just for the sake of being able to continue to bulk for a while after that, get right back to the bulk. Once you're peaked out on the bulk, instead of going right into a cut, you can even maintain peak bulk instead. That's personally what I'd recommend. So it all comes down to why you're cutting. Next question, how to deal with slow progressive overload. So this is a tricky one because obviously it's very individual, so I won't be able to answer this perfectly for your exact situation without context. But I think a lot of people, if you're training honestly and you're looking at your progression honestly, progressive overload is fairly slow. There's a lot of times where you can kind of force it to happen, not really, but you can kind of cheat or rest pause like I talked about a couple minutes ago to get that extra rep or to add a little bit of weight, or you can cut range of motion to add a little weight, etc. And there's all these little ways where you can kind of force progression to happen, and it makes it look like it's happening really fast, but it's really not. So I guess if you're honest about the rate that you're truly progressing at, then it is what it is. And if you're growing, if you're causing stimulus to happen, it's like, can you have just like a tiny little bit of stimulus and grow slower? Yeah, probably. Or can you like completely maximize it and grow faster and see faster progressive overload? I'd say yeah, kind of. But if you're seeing progressive overload and you're being honest about it, that's a pretty good sign that you're growing. So what I'd say here is just kind of accept that it is what it is for now, but also cautiously start to experiment, whether it's adding or removing some volume, like adding volume if yours is low, or potentially trying to reduce junk volume, whether it's adding intensity, anything like this. There's a bunch of ways where you can just kind of experiment with your programming a little bit, whether that's variation in your exercise selection too. I find that's a pretty helpful one. Next question, thoughts on super and giant sets. I personally think they're overrated. They're literally only useful to save some time. So if time is, I guess, a little bit scarce in your schedule, it's very useful. But as far as the actual stimulus goes, it's either going to be like an overall kind of equal. It doesn't do anything better or worse. Or I'd say in probably some cases for sure, it's going to actually negatively impact your gains, because if you really truly are training hard, it's just going to be impossible to have a maximum force output on the next lift when you're hopping right into it. Like I don't know. Maybe when I was a beginner, like I guess I could have done it just fine. But at this point, it's like even after like a set of preacher curls, like I'm just smoked. People say stuff like, "Oh, arm training or whatever, shoulder training is easy and you can superset it at the end of your session." It's like I don't know. I don't know how people are doing that unless you're just not training it hard. Next question, fave places to eat during a cut or bulk. So I'm not a foodie at all. I guess I was born to be a bodybuilder. I eat the same exact thing every day, but what I'd recommend is go to Trader Joe's. That's super helpful for bulking or cutting. It's mostly healthy stuff. Of course, like any grocery store, you can get some junk there too, but I wouldn't recommend that. Some of it's totally fine, but of course, it all depends on your situation. There's a misconception that Trader Joe's is super expensive. I would assume that varies based on where you live, but any Trader Joe's I've been to is actually the same price as like any random grocery store, if not a little bit cheaper. And they have a bunch of like pre-made stuff that's frozen that doesn't have a bunch of added stuff to it. So it's perfect for me because I'm not a foodie. I just get the same thing every time. So if you haven't been to Trader Joe's, go there. Not sponsored, by the way. Next question, dumbbell versus barbell RDL. I would say barbell takes the crown in this one for sure. Dumbbell RDLs are fine. I don't program them unless a client like specifically likes them. But I'd say with dumbbells, it's awkward because your grip can shift around throughout the set. Your hands, so the dumbbells, the center of mass can change too. The more they drift out to your sides, the more it turns into like a trap bar deadlift. The more tension goes into your quads, the less tension goes onto the posterior chain. Most people are going to be strong enough very quickly in their training to where the dumbbells at your gym just aren't heavy enough anyways. So I just find it awkward. The barbell forces it to be a posterior chain movement because you have to go around your knees. And the goal with RDLs, in my opinion, the way I like to do them, you have to have your knees either right above your ankles, so vertical shins, or pushed back a little bit behind your ankles for a little bit more stretch. The barbell forces you to do this. So I'm a huge fan of barbell RDLs. Next question, any tips on how to JM press correctly? It feels like it's a lift that takes time to get used to. So yeah, for sure. So what I'd say is if you have a Smith machine, definitely use that. It takes the entire learning curve out of it, so I would definitely recommend the Smith. If you're trying to do it with a barbell just because it's a barbell, I'd say try the Smith. Barbell's still great. So what I'd say for the JM press, very simply, I talked about this in the tricep video too. At the bottom of the movement, you want your elbow above shoulder height and below wrist height. So this makes it a perfect hybrid lift. I would recommend shoulder width grip and not outside of the shoulder, your shoulder joint, not the outside of the side delt, because that's an inch to 3 inches, depending on how big you are, wider than your actual shoulder joint, and this throws the alignment way off. So line it up with the shoulder joint, or the end of your clavicle is totally fine. Of course, the outside end. So shoulder width, if anything, a hair inside shoulder width, totally fine. That should feel very comfortable. The bar path should end up somewhere between mouth level and clavicle level, and depending on the length of your arms, It will fall somewhere between there, dependent on where you want your elbows, whatever feels best. So those are my top cues to get started. From there, if you are using a barbell and not a Smith machine, I'd pick a spot on the ceiling and just aim for that. If you're doing a barbell JM press, just pretend you're in a Smith machine, and it actually does help quite a bit, I find. It's an awkward lift to learn for some people, but it's an excellent, excellent, excellent lift. I think it's incredibly overlooked and underrated, and it is absolutely worth your time, even if it's awkward to learn. Next question, final one for today. Would you recommend your programs to teens or people who have been training for about a year? So, yes, I would. The upper-lower split works perfectly fine for anybody. It's not a maximalist program. It's not quite a minimalist program, but it's about somewhere in between. It is a program that is going to be not too specific on any area, so it's not going to be like a maximalist or like hyper specialist program to like a certain muscle group or physique or anything. It's just something that most people are going to be able to do because it's 4 days a week. That works for most people's schedules, and I figured for the first free program I released, that absolutely makes the most sense. I've trained quite a few people at this point from before and after starting the channel, and I find that for the vast majority of people, training about 4 times a week is most practical, most sustainable, and it's that sweet spot. So I figured this is the perfect thing to release first instead of something a little bit more niche. I would absolutely recommend that program for anybody, unless you want something that is more specialized or higher frequency or higher volume. The volume in that program is a kind of a perfect sweet spot, same with the frequency. It really is a good program. Not to hype up my own program, but it is free, so then again, I guess how much can I really hype it up? But overall with this program, the upper-lower one, that's something that you can run as a beginner, you can run it as an intermediate, maybe even some advanced lifters can make pretty good gains from that too. It's one of those lifts that really does just kind of work for everybody unless you prefer something a little bit different or you require something different. Like if you're not getting results on that and you know exactly what you need to do and you're more intermediate or advanced, then you can probably switch to something else. The push-pull legs, push-pull program, that is a killer program. It really is great. That's about what I'm running right now. I cleaned it up and kind of optimized it a little bit since I have some funky little preferences. Like I don't care too much about leg training. I don't train abs. Like those are things that I just don't have in my own personal program, but that is very similar to it. It's probably 90% a copy of my own program. That one, probably not the best program for brand new lifters because it is lower frequency for the lower body, and while it's not a specialty, it might be more beneficial for you if you care about leg training to train at a higher frequency. So I think learning those movements is going to be key. The push and the pull days are probably a little bit too high in volume and just overall variation for complete newbies. So if you have maybe 6 months or a year of training under your belt and you feel like you're just more coordinated and just better at lifting at that point, then it can be a totally fine program to run. But I'd say this one is definitely more geared towards late beginners, intermediates as a whole, and then really any advanced lifter that just has the goals of what that program is aimed at. So upper body priority, especially the arms, traps, back in general, delts, legs a little bit more on the back burner. It's really just aimed at kind of that like silver era classic physique look, which I think is super cool. So with that said, that's all I got for today. If you have any questions you want to see answered, leave them in the comments here. Keep an eye out on my Instagram for another poll that I put up, basement.bodybuilding. Give me a follow there, and that's all I got. I'll see you guys in the next one.